I'm Melanie, 32, a financial advisor who built my career helping others manage money wisely, including my own family through tough times. When I saw a $3,200 charge from Party Paradise on my credit card statement, confusion turned to shock as Instagram revealed my brother Andrew's lavish baby shower photos. Have you ever had that moment when you realize your kindness is being mistaken for weakness? That's exactly what happened when I discovered my brother's lavish baby celebration came with an invoice addressed to me. Before I dive into this wild story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of people who believe in setting healthy boundaries. Trust me, after hearing what happened next, you'll want to stick around for the lessons I learned the hard way. To understand why this betrayal cuts so deep, you need to know a bit about my family history. I've always been the financially responsible one in our family. While my peers were taking out massive student loans and spending frivolously, I worked my way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs. I graduated with zero debt and landed a position at Morgan Financial, one of the most prestigious firms in our city. My parents, Robert and Linda, weren't always bad with money, but the 2008 recession hit them hard. Dad lost his management position at a manufacturing company that downsized, and Mom's small clothing boutique couldn't stay afloat when consumer spending plummeted. I was only 25, just starting my career, when I stepped in to help them restructure their debt and avoid foreclosure on our family home. I set up payment plans, helped them create a realistic budget, and even contributed $1,500 monthly to keep them afloat until Dad found another job. Then there's my brother Andrew, 2 years younger than me but seemingly decades behind in financial maturity. While I was building my career, Andrew bounced between majors in college, eventually dropping out in his senior year despite the $40,000 in student loans he'd accumulated. Guess who helped pay those off? Yes, me. I couldn't bear watching him drown in debt that would follow him for decades, so I created a payment plan where I covered the bulk of it. Andrew has always been charming and sociable, the life of every party. My parents adored him and excused his irresponsibility as just being free-spirited. While I received praise for my achievements, it always came with qualifiers. Melanie's so successful, but she works too hard, or she's doing well financially, but hasn't found time for family. 3 years ago, Andrew met Jessica at a friend's wedding. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Their wedding was an elaborate affair at a vineyard, with custom everything and a guest list of 250 people. They asked me to help just a little with wedding expenses, which somehow ballooned into me covering the $15,000 catering bill. I told myself it was a one-time gift, my way of showing support for their new chapter. After the wedding, Andrew and Jessica established a lifestyle that their combined incomes couldn't possibly sustain. He works as a sales associate at an electronics store, and she's a part-time yoga instructor. Yet somehow, they live in a high-end apartment, take lavish vacations, and drive cars with payments that would make most financial advisors cringe. Almost monthly, Andrew would call with some temporary cash flow problem or unexpected expense that required my assistance. Over the past year, I'd been working hard to establish firmer boundaries. When they asked me to help fund their vacation to Bali, I politely declined. When they wanted me to co-sign for a house far beyond their budget, I refused and instead offered to help them find something more reasonable. I even suggested budget counseling, which they rejected immediately, with Andrew calling me judgmental and controlling. My parents consistently enabled Andrew's behavior. Whenever I expressed frustration about his financial dependence, Mom would say, "He's just not good with money like you are," as if financial responsibility was an innate talent rather than a learned skill. Dad would remind me that family helps family, and that since I was doing so well, I should be more generous. When Andrew and Jessica announced they were expecting a baby, my parents were ecstatic. Immediate discussions about converting a spare room into a nursery, buying top-of-the-line baby gear, and planning an elaborate gender reveal party followed. I congratulated them sincerely and gave them what I thought was a meaningful gift. I opened a college fund for their unborn child with an initial $5,000 deposit. Their response was lukewarm at best. Jessica said, "That's so practical," in a tone that clearly indicated disappointment. Andrew later texted me saying, "Thanks, but we were kind of hoping for something we could actually use now." My parents later called to suggest I could have been more generous or thought about what they really needed, like the $1,200 stroller they'd been eyeing. Despite these tensions, I never expected what would happen next. I thought we had an understanding. I would help in emergencies and for truly important things, but everyday expenses and luxuries were their responsibility. I was wrong. So very wrong. It was a typical Tuesday evening when I sat down to review my monthly expenses. As a financial advisor, I practice what I preach about regular budget monitoring. Scrolling through my credit card statement, a charge from Party Paradise caught my eye, $3,200. I didn't recognize the vendor or recall making any purchase remotely that large. As I continued scanning, more unfamiliar charges appeared. $1,850 for Elite Catering, $950 for Baby Luxe Boutique, $780 for Custom Embroidery, and $720 for Premier Photography. All told, the unauthorized charges exceeded $7,500. My first thought was identity theft. I immediately called my credit card company to report potential fraud. The customer service representative checked the transaction details and delivered shocking news. The charges weren't made online or through a data breach. Someone had physically used my card at these locations. "Miss Thompson, these charges were all made in person with your physical card," he explained. The card was present and the correct PIN was entered for the larger transactions. That's when I remembered the emergency card. After my dad's heart scare last year, I had given my mother a spare credit card to keep for genuine emergencies. I had been explicit about its purpose: medical situations, urgent home repairs, or true crises only. "Can you tell me when these charges were made?" I asked, a sinking feeling growing in my stomach. "They were all processed between April 15th and 18th, he replied. That time frame coincided with what I knew was Jessica's baby shower. I hadn't received an invitation, but my mother had mentioned it was happening sometime in April. I had assumed my invitation was lost in the mail or forthcoming. After hanging up with the credit card company, I opened Instagram, almost on autopilot. Jessica posted almost everything about her pregnancy journey, from the gender reveal, a boy, to her weekly bump photos to her elaborate maternity photo shoot. Sure enough, her recent posts showcased a baby shower that looked more like a celebrity event than a family gathering. The venue was a stunning rooftop garden with panoramic city views. A professional photographer had captured guests mingling beneath white pergolas draped with greenery and soft fabric. There was a 5-tier cake decorated with intricate fondant baby items, a champagne tower with sparkling cider for Jessica, and a grazing table that stretched at least 12 feet. But what caught my eye most was the balloon installation. A massive wall of blue and silver balloons created a backdrop for photos, with "Welcome Baby Thompson" spelled out in giant silver letters. In one photo, Jessica posed in front of it, cradling her belly, wearing a custom-made silk maternity dress. In another set of photos, guests were holding up tiny baby clothes. Not just any clothes, but custom-embroidered onesies with phrases like "Future CEO," "Mom's Little Prince," and "Daddy's Mini-Me." Each guest apparently received one as a party favor, along with monogrammed gift bags containing expensive-looking baby products. I scrolled through dozens of photos, recognizing family members, friends, and even some of my own colleagues who were closer to Andrew than to me. My heart raced as I continued searching for any sign of myself in these images. Perhaps I had been invited and somehow completely missed it, but there was nothing. No photos of me, no mentions, not even a "missed you there" comment. I frantically checked my email, text messages, and even my physical mail for an invitation I might have overlooked. Nothing. I called my cousin Rachel, who I'd spotted in several photos. "Oh, it was amazing," she gushed. "Jessica's sister Emily planned the whole thing. Didn't you get an invitation? I assumed you couldn't make it because of work." "No," I said quietly. "I never received an invitation." "That's weird," Rachel replied, her tone changing. "Especially since—" "Well, never mind." Especially since what? I pressed. It's just that your mom was telling everyone how generous you were to sponsor the whole event. She kept saying what a wonderful sister you are. The room seemed to spin around me. I thanked Rachel and hung up, then sat in stunned silence. They had used my emergency card to fund an elaborate baby shower and hadn't even invited me to attend. The betrayal was breathtaking in its audacity. Not only had they stolen from me, but they had also excluded me from the very event I had unknowingly financed. It wasn't just about the money, though $7,500 was certainly significant. It was the calculated nature of it all. They had planned this elaborate event, decided not to include me, yet had no qualms about using my money to pay for it. And then they had the nerve to portray it as my voluntary contribution, accepting praise for my generosity, while I remained completely unaware. That night, I barely slept, my mind cycling between hurt, rage, and disbelief. By morning, I had moved past the initial shock and was ready to confront my family about what they had done. The next morning, I called my mother. My hands were shaking as I dialed, but I was determined to maintain my composure. She answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful. "Melanie, what a nice surprise. I was just thinking about you." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need to ask you about some charges on my credit card. There's over $7,500 in expenses for what looks like Andrew and Jessica's baby shower." There was a brief pause before she responded with casual nonchalance that left me stunned.
"Oh, that."
"Yes, we used your emergency card. Didn't think you'd mind since it's family." "You didn't think I'd mind?" I repeated, struggling to keep my voice level. "Mom, that card was for actual emergencies. Medical emergencies. And why wasn't I invited to the shower that I apparently paid for?" Her tone immediately became defensive. "Well, we thought you'd be uncomfortable, honey. All those pregnant women and baby talk. You're so career-focused, and since you're still single, we just thought it might be awkward for you." I was speechless. My mother had just suggested that at 32, I would be somehow traumatized by being around pregnant women because I wasn't married with children myself. "Besides," she continued, filling my stunned silence, "your name is in the thank you cards. Jessica made sure to include you as a sponsor. Everyone knows how generous you were." "A sponsor?" "Mom, I wasn't a sponsor. You stole my credit card and charged thousands of dollars without my knowledge or permission." "Stole is a very harsh word, Melanie," she replied, her voice taking on the wounded tone she always used when criticized. "We're family. And frankly, you've been so tight with money lately, refusing to help with the house down payment and the Bali trip. We knew you could afford it." I ended the call shortly after, realizing I wasn't going to get through to her. Next, I called my father, hoping for a more reasonable response. "Dad, did you know Mom used my emergency credit card to pay for Andrew's baby shower? A shower I wasn't even invited to." He sighed heavily. "Melanie, your brother is starting a family. It's an important time for him, and we wanted to make it special. You're doing so well financially, and family supports family." "But Dad, this wasn't support. This was theft. And why wasn't I invited?" "That was Jessica's decision, primarily. She felt you two don't really connect, and she wanted to be surrounded by positive energy. You tend to be critical." "Critical?" "Because I don't applaud every irresponsible financial decision they make." "See, that's exactly the attitude we're talking about," he replied. "And honestly, this wasn't the first time we've used the card." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, not the first time?" "Just small things here and there. The crib, some doctor's appointments that their insurance didn't fully cover. Nothing major until the shower." I was stunned. They had been systematically using my card without my knowledge, apparently feeling completely entitled to do so. "You need to return the card immediately," I said. "And arrangements need to be made to pay me back." "Melanie, can't you just let this go for the sake of family peace? With a baby coming, they're under enough stress without financial pressure." I hung up, realizing that expecting my father to hold anyone accountable was futile. My next step was confronting Andrew directly. I sent him a text, not trusting myself to maintain composure in a phone call. Andrew, I just found out about the charges for your baby shower on my credit card. We need to talk about this immediately and arrange repayment. His response came quickly. Seriously? You're making a big deal about this now? Mom said you were fine with it. Why do you always have to make everything about you? Make everything about me? You used my card without permission for a party I wasn't invited to. That's theft. We didn't invite you because you always bring negativity with your judgmental attitude. And now you're proving our point. You're just jealous because I'm starting a happy family while you're still alone. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My brother was actually suggesting that my objection to having $7,500 stolen from me was rooted in jealousy. This isn't about jealousy, I typed back. This is about boundaries and respect, neither of which you seem to understand. Whatever, he replied. If you make a big deal about this, don't expect to be in your nephew's life. We don't need toxic people around our child. As if the day couldn't get worse, 2 hours later, while still processing these confrontations, I received a notification that Jessica had tagged me in an Instagram post. Curious, I opened the app to find a carousel of baby shower photos with a caption that made my stomach drop. Still glowing from the most amazing baby shower a girl could ask for. Rooftop views, gourmet food, custom everything. Fully funded by our favorite fool. Some people may not understand the importance of family, but at least their credit cards work. Hashtag blessed, hashtag baby shower, hashtag family funded. The post had dozens of likes already, including one from Andrew with a laughing emoji comment. Several of Jessica's friends had commented things like, OMG Savage Fire, and way to make her pay literally face with tears of joy. The public humiliation was the final straw. They had stolen from me, excluded me, and were now mocking me publicly. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but it was overshadowed by resolve. I had allowed this dynamic to continue for too long, making excuses for their behavior and accepting their manipulation. I replied to Jessica's post with a simple comment. Fools done funding. Enjoy the shower. Then I immediately called my credit card company to freeze the card and formally report the fraudulent charges. After reporting the fraud, I sat alone in my apartment, the full weight of what had happened finally hitting me. This wasn't just about money. It was about years of being used, taken for granted, and manipulated by the people who should have loved me most. The tears came suddenly and violently, years of suppressed hurt pouring out all at once. Between sobs, I asked myself painful questions. Had my family ever really valued me beyond what I could provide financially? Was I nothing more than an ATM to them? Why had I allowed this treatment for so long? The betrayal felt complete and devastating. I had built my career helping others achieve financial security, yet I had failed to protect myself from the most obvious exploitation. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts and calls from family members, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Instead, I called the one person I knew would understand without judgment, my best friend, Stephanie. They did what? Stephanie exclaimed after I explained the situation. Mel, that's not just inconsiderate, that's literally credit card fraud. Family or not, they stole from you. Her validation was like a life raft in a stormy sea. For years, Stephanie had gently suggested that my family took advantage of my generosity, but I had always defended them, making excuses for their behavior. Now, I couldn't deny what was right in front of me. I've been telling you for years that they exploit your kindness, she continued, but this goes beyond taking advantage. This is calculated and cruel. And to not even invite you? That's just twisted. I feel so stupid, I admitted. All those times I helped them, thinking it was temporary, thinking they'd eventually become more responsible. I've been enabling them for years. You're not stupid, Mel. You're kind and generous, and they weaponize that against you. But now you've seen their true colors, and you can protect yourself going forward. Stephanie came over that night with wine and takeout. She helped me make a list of practical next steps and reminded me that I had nothing to be ashamed of. The shame belonged entirely to those who had betrayed my trust. The following day at work, I was struggling to focus when my coworker Marcus noticed something was wrong. Marcus and I weren't particularly close, but we had a friendly professional relationship. When he asked if I was okay during our lunch break, something about his genuine concern made me open up. Actually, I'm dealing with some family financial issues, I said cautiously. It's complicated. Family financial abuse? He asked with surprising directness. When I looked startled, he added, I recognize the signs. Been there myself. Over lunch, Marcus shared his own experience with a brother who had consistently exploited him financially. He described the guilt, the manipulation tactics, and the difficult process of establishing boundaries. The hardest part for me was accepting that helping them wasn't actually helping, he explained. By continuing to bail my brother out, I was preventing him from experiencing the natural consequences of his actions and learning from them. Marcus recommended a therapist who specialized in family issues and financial boundaries, Dr. Patricia Thompson. He also sent me resources about financial abuse, which helped me understand that what I had experienced had a name and was more common than I realized. One more thing, Marcus said before we returned to work. There's an online support group that really helped me. It's anonymous, so you can share freely without worry. That evening, I joined the forum Marcus had recommended. Financial Boundaries, Family Edition. Reading through other stories was both heartbreaking and comforting. There were people from all walks of life sharing experiences painfully similar to mine. One thread particularly resonated with me, titled, When Family Sees You as a Bank, Not a Person. Contributors described the slow erosion of genuine relationship as financial exploitation took center stage, leaving them feeling like human ATMs rather than loved ones. I created an anonymous account and shared my story. Within hours, supportive comments poured in. What they did wasn't just financially abusive, it was emotionally cruel. You deserve better. The exclusion from the event you paid for was a power play. They wanted to show they could take without giving anything in return, not even basic respect. I cut contact with my financially abusive family 3 years ago. Hardest and best decision I ever made. Family obligation is a two-way street. They've shown they don't feel obligated to respect you, so why should you feel obligated to finance them? The validation from these strangers who understood exactly what I was experiencing was incredibly healing. They didn't minimize what had happened or suggest I should forgive and forget for the sake of family harmony. Instead, they acknowledged the severity of the betrayal and supported my right to protect myself going forward. Through the forum, I began to understand that my situation wasn't unique or my fault. Financial abuse within families follows predictable patterns, and enablers like my parents play a crucial role in maintaining the dynamic. Most importantly, I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for both my well-being and any hope of healthier relationships in the future. As one forum member wrote, sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for someone who consistently abuses your generosity is to stop making their problems your responsibility. It's not abandonment. It's allowing them the dignity of solving their own problems. With this new perspective and support system in place, I began to feel stronger and more resolved. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it was now accompanied by clarity and determination. I was ready to take concrete action to address what had happened and protect myself from further exploitation. With my emotions somewhat stabilized and a support system in place, I turned my attention to practical matters. The first step was addressing the financial aspect of the situation. I had already frozen the emergency credit card, but there was more to be done. I called my credit card company again and spoke with their fraud department. I explained that while I had willingly provided the card for emergency use, it had been used without my authorization for non-emergency purchases. The representative was sympathetic and walked me through the formal dispute process. We'll need you to complete a fraudulent charge declaration, she explained. Since the card was physically given to a family member, it becomes a bit more complex than typical fraud cases, but unauthorized use is still unauthorized use. I completed the necessary paperwork, providing detailed information about each charge and documentation of the limited purpose for which the card had been provided. I also submitted screenshots of text messages where I had previously specified to my mother that the card was for medical emergencies only. The credit card representative advised me that the investigation could take up to 30 days, during which the charges would remain frozen. She also suggested I file a police report to strengthen my case, though she acknowledged many people hesitate to take legal action against family members. I wasn't ready to involve law enforcement, but I did want professional legal advice. I scheduled a consultation with Rachel Bennett, an attorney specializing in financial disputes. During our meeting, Rachel outlined my options clearly. "You have several avenues available," she explained. "You could pursue criminal charges for credit card fraud, which would potentially result in criminal penalties for your family members. Alternatively, you could file a civil suit to recover the funds plus damages." "I don't want to send my family to jail," I said. "I just want them to understand they can't treat me this way and to repay what they took." "In that case, I recommend we start with a formal demand letter," Rachel suggested. "It establishes the seriousness of the situation and your willingness to pursue legal remedies if necessary, while still giving them an opportunity to make things right without court involvement." We drafted a letter detailing the unauthorized charges, demanding full repayment within 30 days, and clearly stating that failure to comply would result in legal action. The letter was professional and factual, avoiding emotional language while still conveying the gravity of the situation. "Be prepared for significant family backlash when they receive this," Rachel warned. "Based on what you've shared about their reactions so far, they're likely to escalate before considering compliance." Her prediction proved accurate. Within hours of the letter being delivered, my phone exploded with notifications. My mother left tearful voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart over money. My father sent lengthy texts about how disappointed he was in my extreme measures. Andrew and Jessica posted vague but pointed social media updates about toxic family members and true colors showing. Anticipating this reaction, I had already implemented communication boundaries. I blocked my family on all social media platforms, but had a friend monitor their public posts to document any defamatory statements. I set up email filters to direct family messages to a separate folder that I could review when emotionally prepared. I didn't answer their calls, but saved all voicemails as potential evidence. These boundaries weren't just about the legal situation, they were essential for my emotional health. Each contact attempt from my family contained manipulation tactics I now recognized: guilt, minimization, gaslighting, and attempts to shift blame onto me for overreacting. With the financial and legal aspects in motion, I turned my attention to my personal well-being. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Thompson, the therapist Marcus had recommended. Our first session was revelatory. "What you're experiencing is a form of grief," Dr. Thompson explained. "You're mourning the family you thought you had and coming to terms with the reality of who they actually are." She helped me understand that my feelings of guilt and uncertainty were normal responses to family estrangement, even when that estrangement was necessary and justified. We began working on techniques to manage these emotions and reinforce my sense of self-worth outside of my utility to others. I also joined an in-person support group for survivors of family financial abuse. Meeting others who had walked similar paths provided practical advice and emotional support that online forums couldn't fully match. One participant, Sophia, had been through an almost identical situation with her sister and offered particularly helpful insights about navigating family events in the future. To process my thoughts more thoroughly, I started journaling daily. I documented not only what had happened, but also my evolving understanding of the family dynamics that had enabled the exploitation. I wrote about the subtle ways I had been conditioned to prioritize others' needs above my own, how financial responsibility had become a burden rather than a strength in my family context, and how I'd confused sacrifice with love. 3 weeks into this process, I felt strong enough to take a personal retreat weekend at a cabin in the mountains. Away from work and daily distractions, I reflected deeply on what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with my family moving forward. I recognized that while I couldn't control their behavior, I could set clear parameters for what I would accept in my life. By the time I returned, the credit card company had completed its investigation and sided in my favor. All charges were permanently reversed, and they issued me a new card with enhanced security features. They also added notes to my account prohibiting authorization for anyone other than myself, even with verbal approval. This financial resolution was validating, but I knew it would trigger the next phase of family conflict. When the vendors began demanding payment from Andrew and Jessica for the reverse charges, the real test of my new boundaries would begin. The credit card company's decision to reverse the charges hit my family like a bomb. The vendors who had provided services for the baby shower began contacting Andrew and Jessica immediately, demanding payment for the reverse charges and threatening collections. My mother initiated what can only be described as a family smear campaign. She sent a mass text to every extended family member, from cousins to great-aunts, painting me as an unreasonable, bitter woman who had initially agreed to fund the shower but vindicatively withdrew support after the fact. Melanie has always been jealous of her brother's happiness, her message read in part. Now she's trying to ruin what should be the happiest time in Andrew and Jessica's lives because she's bitter about her own childless state. Please reach out and help them through this difficult time that their own sister has created. The response was swift. My phone filled with messages from well-meaning relatives who had only heard my mother's version of events. Aunts called to tell me family is everything and that I should be the bigger person. Uncles reminded me that blood is thicker than water and suggested I was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. The family group chat, which I rarely participated in but remained a member of, exploded with discussion about the situation. Most comments supported Andrew and Jessica, expressing shock at my cruelty and pettiness. Several relatives started a crowdfunding campaign to help them cover the now-due baby shower expenses. What my family hadn't anticipated was that their public campaign would prompt others to reach out to me directly to hear my side of the story. My cousin Michael, who had always been skeptical of Andrew's entitlement, called to check on me. Aunt Linda's version didn't add up, he explained. I know you wouldn't do something like this without serious cause. When I explained what had actually happened, Michael was appalled. They threw a party you paid for but weren't invited to, and they're playing the victims? That's gaslighting on an Olympic level. Michael wasn't the only one. My father's sister, Aunt Patricia, reached out next. Unlike my mother's sisters, who had always enabled Andrew's behavior, Patricia had a reputation for straight talk and fairness. Your mother called me crying about how you're abandoning the family, she said. But I've watched how they've treated you for years, Melanie. Always taking, rarely giving back, and never showing proper appreciation. I asked your mother point-blank if they had used your card without permission and didn't invite you to the shower. She couldn't deny it. Patricia's support meant everything to me. As one of the family matriarchs, her validation carried weight, and she wasn't afraid to share her perspective with others. Within days, the unified family front against me had developed significant cracks. Meanwhile, the social media drama escalated. Jessica posted a tearful video about financial abandonment during pregnancy without naming me directly, but making it clear who she was talking about. Andrew shared cryptic posts about discovering who your true family is during hardship and protecting his unborn child from negative influences. These posts generated sympathy from their friends, but also raised questions. Jessica's own sister, Emily, who had planned the shower, privately messaged me with an unexpected apology. I had no idea the funding situation wasn't consensual, she wrote. Jessica told me you had happily offered to cover everything as your gift to the baby. I feel terrible about my role in this now. Emily's message revealed that Jessica had lied not just to vendors, but to her own family about my involvement. This pattern of deception stretched far beyond what I had initially understood. As the social media drama unfolded, I maintained my public silence. My therapist had advised against engaging in a public fight where emotions were high and facts could be distorted. Instead, I focused on responding privately to those who reached out directly, sharing my side of the story calmly and with documentation when appropriate. This strategy proved effective. While I wasn't broadcasting my perspective, the truth was spreading through private conversations. Several family friends contacted me to express their support, saying they had always observed how one-sided my relationship with Andrew seemed to be. James Peterson, an old family friend who had known us since childhood, sent a particularly touching message. I've watched you support your brother through countless fresh starts over the years. Your generosity has been consistent, while his appreciation has been notably absent. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's long overdue. For weeks after filing the fraud claim, I received the official notification from the credit card company. Their investigation had confirmed unauthorized use, and all charges were permanently reversed and refunded to my account. The letter stated clearly that the vendors would need to seek payment from the individuals who had actually ordered their services. Within hours of the charges being reversed, the calls began. First from Jessica, whose initial tearful pleas quickly turned to rage when I didn't immediately offer to pay the bills. "You've ruined everything," she shouted. "The vendors are threatening to send us to collections. This will destroy our credit right when we're trying to buy a house for the baby." "I'm sorry you're in this position," I replied calmly, "but I didn't authorize those charges." "You did." "But your family. You're supposed to help family." "Family doesn't steal from family," I responded. "And family doesn't exclude family from events they've unknowingly funded." Andrew called next, alternating between threats and attempts at manipulation. "You'll never see your nephew if you don't fix this," he warned, then switched to, "Come on, sis, you know we're good for it. We'll pay you back over time." My mother's approach was perhaps the most difficult to withstand. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, crying about how I was destroying the family just before the birth of the first grandchild. "How could you do this to us?" she sobbed. "Andrew and Jessica can't afford to pay these bills. The collection agencies will harass them during Jessica's third trimester. Do you want her to go into early labor from stress?" "Mom," I said firmly, "I didn't create this situation. You all did when you decided to use my card without permission. There were countless other ways to handle this, including simply inviting me to a more reasonably priced shower that fit within your actual budget. But you have the money. You've always had money to spare. Having money doesn't obligate me to spend it how others demand. My financial stability comes from careful planning and boundaries, not an endless supply of cash." As she left, still crying, I felt the familiar weight of guilt. But underneath it was something new, a sense of righteous anger and self-respect that gave me strength. For perhaps the first time, I was prioritizing my own well-being over others' expectations, and despite the discomfort, it felt fundamentally right. After weeks of emotional turmoil, financial investigation, and family conflict, I knew we needed a structured way to address the situation. At Dr. Thompson's suggestion, I arranged for a family meeting at a neutral location with a professional mediator present. I made it clear that this was the only context in which I was willing to discuss the situation further. Surprisingly, everyone agreed to attend. The mediator, Kimberly Jackson, was experienced in family financial disputes and established ground rules at the beginning of the session. No interrupting, no personal attacks, and a focus on solutions rather than blame. I spoke first, presenting a clear, factual account of what had happened and how it had affected me, both financially and emotionally. I emphasized that the issue wasn't just about money, but about trust, respect, and consent. "I've spent years helping all of you financially," I explained calmly. "I've never begrudged legitimate help when needed. But taking my card without permission, using it for luxury expenses, excluding me from the event, and then publicly mocking me crossed every reasonable boundary. I cannot and will not continue a relationship where I'm valued only for what I can provide financially." My mother spoke next, still attempting to minimize what had happened. "We should have asked first," she conceded reluctantly, "but we knew you'd want to help make the shower special. We didn't invite you because pregnancy is such a sensitive topic given your situation." "My situation?" I asked. "Being single and childless at your age," she replied, as if it were obvious. The mediator intervened, asking my mother to consider whether she was making assumptions about my feelings rather than respecting my autonomy. My father, looking uncomfortable, admitted that they had become too dependent on my financial support. "We got used to Melanie helping out," he said. "Maybe we took it for granted that she would always say yes." Andrew and Jessica were the most resistant to accepting responsibility. Jessica insisted that since my mother had the card, she assumed its use was authorized. Andrew maintained that I was overreacting to teach them a lesson because I disapproved of their lifestyle. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, the mediator helped us identify the core issues: unauthorized use of my credit card, exclusion from an event I unknowingly funded, public humiliation via social media, and a pattern of financial dependence that had undermined genuine family relationships. With these issues clarified, we moved to potential resolutions. I presented my non-negotiable requirements. First, full repayment of all unauthorized charges. I offered a structured payment plan over 12 months with no interest, which was far more generous than any commercial creditor would provide. Second, a written acknowledgement of wrongdoing and apology from each family member involved. Third, clear boundaries for future financial interactions. No loans without formal documentation, no use of my credit cards under any circumstances, and no assumption of my financial support for any event or expense without explicit prior agreement. Finally, a 3-month cooling-off period with limited contact to allow emotions to settle and new patterns to establish. These terms are not punitive, I explained. They're the minimum requirements for rebuilding trust. Without trust, we have no foundation for a healthy relationship. My parents reluctantly agreed to all terms, though my mother continued to insist I was being unnecessarily formal about family matters. Andrew and Jessica balked at the repayment plan, but eventually agreed when the mediator pointed out that their alternatives would likely involve collection agencies or legal action. The meeting concluded with a written agreement that everyone signed. As we prepared to leave, Jessica made a final attempt at manipulation. "I guess you don't care that your nephew will grow up hearing how his aunt abandoned the family right before he was born." I looked her directly in the eyes. "My nephew will grow up with the parents he has. What he learns about respect, responsibility, and relationships will come primarily from you. I hope you consider carefully what examples you set." The 3 months that followed were challenging but clarifying. My parents adhered to the payment schedule, transferring funds on time each month. Communication was minimal but civil. Andrew and Jessica made the first 2 payments on time, but began making excuses for the third, claiming unexpected baby expenses had stretched them thin. I held firm to the agreement, reminding them that I had specifically structured the payments to be manageable. They eventually paid, but their resentment was palpable in every interaction. When my nephew Ethan was born in August, I sent a beautiful gift basket to the hospital, but didn't visit. My mother called, incredulous that I wouldn't come meet my nephew immediately. "We're still in the cooling-off period we all agreed to," I reminded her. "I'm respecting the boundaries we established, but this is different. This is your nephew's birth. The boundaries aren't conditional, Mom. They apply to all situations, especially emotional ones where pressure might be applied." 6 months after the mediated agreement, our family dynamic had transformed into something I would describe as limited but functional. My parents and I spoke weekly, with conversations focused on general life updates rather than financial matters. They had begun working with a financial advisor I recommended and were making progress toward greater independence. Andrew and Jessica completed the repayment plan, but chose to maintain minimal contact afterward. They sent formal birth announcements and holiday cards, but didn't extend invitations to visit or meet Ethan. Through family grapevine, I learned they told others I was too busy with my career to be involved in their son's life. Rather than fight this narrative, I focused on my own well-being and growth. I established a new friend group through interest-based activities rather than family connections. These relationships, built on mutual respect and shared interests, provided genuine connection without the undercurrent of obligation or exploitation I had grown accustomed to in family interactions. My career flourished as I channeled more energy into professional development. I received a significant promotion to senior advisor, managing a team of my own and developing specialized services for women in transitional life phases. The irony wasn't lost on me that my personal experience with financial exploitation had deepened my professional insight and empathy. With my finances no longer drained by family emergencies, I purchased my dream home, A modern condo with city views not unlike those from the rooftop venue where my brother's baby shower had been held. I didn't share this achievement with my family, having learned that financial milestones often triggered requests rather than congratulations. I also began dating again after a long hiatus. Thomas, a landscape architect I met through a mutual friend, understood family complexity from his own experience with divorced parents and step-siblings. His respect for my boundaries and appreciation for my self-sufficiency were refreshing changes from previous relationships. Perhaps most meaningfully, I anonymously established a college fund for my nephew Ethan, arranged through a trust that would become available to him at 18 regardless of his parents' financial situation or our relationship status. While Andrew and Jessica had rejected the practical gift of education savings when I offered it directly, I still wanted Ethan to have options his parents might not provide. 1 year after the baby shower incident, I met my mother for coffee. Our relationship had stabilized into something more adult and balanced than it had ever been before. "I want you to know," she said hesitantly, "that I understand better now why what we did was wrong. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect." Yes, I agreed simply. It was always about respect. "Andrew and Jessica still don't see it that way," she admitted. "They think you abandoned the family when they needed you most." "I know. And that's their perspective to hold. But I know the truth, and so do you." She nodded slowly. "I do. And I'm sorry it took something this extreme for me to see it." The journey from financial doormat to self-respect had been painful, but necessary. I had learned critical lessons about the difference between generosity and exploitation, about setting boundaries with those who claim the right to cross them, and about my own worth beyond what I could provide to others. Family relationships aren't unconditional, despite what conventional wisdom suggests. They require mutual respect, consideration, and care to thrive. When these elements are consistently absent, it's not selfish to protect yourself. It's essential. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? What helped you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that setting financial boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your kindness deserves respect, not exploitation.